I carefully climbed through the window. If my mother sees me as a guy, I'm finished. There were footsteps outside the door. I jumped into bed and pulled the covers over me. But my mom didn't even come in, just shouted that she was going on a business trip again. After divorcing my dad, she worked all the time and didn't care about me, and I still wanted to talk to her heart to heart as it was in childhood. The only thing I still had was volleyball. I trained myself for many years. I decided that I would become the best. And a week ago, I was lucky. The principal brought legendary Terrence Smith to the school meeting and announced that he would be our volleyball coach. Smith said he was missing one player on the team. Everyone in the hall whispered, because his students became the best volleyball players. I was determined that the place on the team would be mine. But it turned out that Smith only trained guys. It really pissed me off because I was the best player. Well, if you need a guy, okay, I'll change into him, take a place in the team and become the captain. The selection was tough. I was nervous, and the wig was constantly slipping on its side. There were only two of us left, me and the nasty guy Nick. He took me for a rookie and said I might not even hope to make the team. And then our names were called. Well, let's see who's rookie. I was uncomfortable in my men's short, and the bandages I'd wrapped around my chest got into my skin, but that didn't stop me from beating Nick. And when he left the field, he hissed that he would take revenge on me. But I was no longer listening to him because the coach was walking towards me with a serious face. Suddenly, he smiled and said that I had passed the selection. Yes. Then the team captain, Evan, approached me. All the girls at school were crazy about him. To me, he was just a cocky jock. I would only be too happy to remove him from the captain's chair. Evan congratulated me dryly, but Smith said there was no time to talk. The first practice session would start right away. It turned out that he brought some friends from the state volleyball team to train us before the competition. If you lose, you have nothing to do in this big game, Smith said. During the set, I gave my best along with Evan. He played well, but we still didn't score a single point. At timeout, the boys lied that Evan was asking too much of them. And I decided that I should win the guys over to my side by giving them a break from training. I blurted that in my previous team, the captain always threw cool parties to relieve the tension, and supposedly my friend Alexis was having a party this Friday. If we win, I invite everyone. It was risky, but Mom was away for the whole week. The guys cheered up and we smashed the opponents. Everyone was excited about the party, but Evan didn't like it. He said briefly that he would drop by if he was free and left. Yeah, he obviously didn't like me as Alex. Let's see what he would say about beautiful Alexis. She would be able to find out all his weaknesses to remove him from the post of captain. On the day of the party, the entire volleyball team and Evan showed up. He was clearly in a bad mood. And among them was Nick, the guy from the qualifiers. I was about to protest, but the guy started asking me where Alex was. I did not lose my head and said that he was just late. Evan's expression darkened at the mention of Alex and he walked away. While everyone was dancing, I carefully sat down next to him and asked him why he was so sad. But he didn't answer and began to shower me with compliments. That was nice, of course, but right now, I needed to find his weak spot. Not flirt. I asked if he was just not ready to compete. Then Evan sighed and said that he thought he would soon be moved from the post of captain by an upstart. It's about me. I mean about Alex. Evan said volleyball was all he lived for. His voice faltered. Evan's mom was seriously ill, and maybe she didn't have much time left. Only training saved him from heavy thoughts, and recently, he promised his mother that he would become a better captain, no matter what. It blew me away. I suddenly realized that we were very similar to him. After all, volleyball was also my salvation from problems. But we were interrupted by the cry of someone from the team. Hey, we need to call Alex. He can't ignore his team like that. The phone immediately rang in my pocket, and they all stared at me. I lied that I wasn't feeling well and quickly ran upstairs. I rushed to my room and the phone kept ringing. If I dropped a call, the guys would definitely not forgive Alex. What should I do? I decided to change into Alex. I washed off my makeup and put on my pants and wig. And suddenly the door opened. Nick stood in the doorway. What the hell? He asked me what Alex was doing in Alex's room. I replied that I wanted to appear spectacularly and rolled down the banister from the second floor. Nick grinned enigmatically and left the room. I went to the mirror to adjust my wig and was horrified. A lock of my hair was sticking out from under it. As Nick noticed, I was finished. As promised, I made a spectacular descent from the banister to the first floor. And the guys from the team met me with deafening cheers. They said that the party just rocked and were very grateful for the invitation. But at that moment, the front door opened, and I saw my mother on the threshold. She didn't recognize me as Alex. My legs couldn't move in terror. I had to get back into my clothes as soon as possible. While my mother kicked everyone out of the house, I hurriedly pulled on a dress in the bathroom and then went out to her. She started yelling that I was a bad daughter and didn't appreciate what she was doing for us. For this party, my mother punished me and transferred me to homeschooling. While she worked all day in her room, I couldn't go to training now, and the competition was coming up very soon. What to do? I let everyone down, but suddenly, on the day of the game, Evan called me. He said they couldn't do it without me. I was dumbfounded, so, for the sake of the team, Evan overstepped his pride and called his competitor Alex. I stood for a moment in a daze, but then I came to my senses and decided, now or never. I climbed out of the window and ran to the guys. I ran into Evan outside the locker room and just wanted to thank him for calling, as I was surrounded by guys that led to the coach. Hey, what are you doing? They shoved me into his office and Coach Smith told me even though I had been away for a long time, they had decided by a general vote that I was the new team captain. Oh my god, I've been dreaming about it! But then I met Evan's eyes. He lowered his head and silently went to the field. There was a woman in a wheelchair in the front row. And Evan went over and hugged her. It was his mother. She had come to see him, despite her illness. My stomach clenched. I wish my mom was supportive too. When the game started, Evan missed almost all the balls and constantly looked back at the first row, and then I realized that for the two of them, volleyball was more than a victory. Maybe this was their last moments together. Then I decided to screw up the first set and show Evan's mom that he was really a great captain. I sidelined the strongest players and put the weakest in the attack. The guys started making mistakes, and we quickly lost. The team was indignant. The coach told me off and put Evan back as captain. He just lit up. Under Evan's leadership, we quickly rallied and defeated them. While the guys were celebrating, Evan took me aside and thanked me. He knew I'd done it on purpose. But why? I said I wanted to be a captain. But I was sure I still had a lot to learn from him. During the award ceremony, the audience chanted the name of our team. The guys were cheering. And I was happy that I helped Evan. The referee had already picked up the cup and went to the microphone when suddenly, Nasty Nick appeared on the field. He brazenly and unceremoniously snatched the microphone from the referee and loudly declared that the attacker Alex was a liar. The guys looked at me in disbelief, and I cringed. What was he up to? Nick lunged at me and tore off my wig and shouted, "It's a girl!" Evan and the entire team froze in shock. I didn't know where to hide. The judge cleared his throat and said that our victory was annulled due to a violation of the rules. The audience booed and started throwing cans at me. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore and ran away. After this incident, Smith was fired and I stayed at home all day. But one night, someone rang the doorbell. It turned out that Coach Smith came to my house. It was so unexpected. He said that he now worked at another school and offered to become the captain of his women's team. Smith was training girls now and said I was the one who inspired him. I didn't know what to say, but suddenly my mother came out to us. She came up to me and gently hugged me. She heard Smith's words and said that she would support me if I decided to continue training. I almost cried with happiness. It had been so long since we hugged. My mother apologized for not paying attention to me for so long. She regretted it once. She also did not apologize to my father, and he left forever. She didn't want to lose me. As soon as the coach left, I rushed to school. My mom helped me understand that it was never too late to ask for forgiveness. When I ran into the gym, the guys were already going home. Among them, I saw liquid equipment and a bag of water. I called the guys and said I needed to apologize to everyone, and I understood that I would never regain their trust. But being part of their team was the best thing that had ever happened to me in my life. I started to leave, but Evan stopped me. He said he wasn't angry. He was actually delighted with my bravery. The guys applauded and said that they wouldn't have won without me anyway. After 6 months in Coach Smith's team, I became captain. Evan's mom was on the mend, and he and I hung out all the time. Thanks to the support of my loved ones, I will win many more victories, and I will definitely never feel alone again. Sam raced along the racetrack at the speed of 240 miles an hour. He skidded on the turns. I gripped the seat with all my strength, and Sam yelled at me to jump out of the car right now. What? I am going to crash! Suddenly at the next turn, Sam abruptly slowed down. I hit my forehead on the glass. What the hell are you doing? Sam pressed the emergency door opening button. What did he want to do? God, I was going to fall out. He pushed me hard. I immediately flew out and felt like I hit something. Pain shot through my entire body. My vision darkened. I only had time to notice Sam's wild look, but I loved him for that look and passion for racing. We met at a race car show where I was doing a TV report. I loved racing since I was a kid, and I used to watch it with my dad every weekend. During the live broadcast, it suddenly began to rain and a strong wind rose. Then Sam, one of the best racers in the state, came up to me. He opened his umbrella over me and suggested that we go to lunch together. I was so happy, but I was still looking for some kind of trick in this. I never had any luck with guys, but Sam was so kind and had a brilliant sense of humor. At the end of the evening, I realized that I was beginning to fall in love. A week later, he asked me to move in with him. It was all like a happy dream. I couldn't believe that after all those assholes, I'd finally met someone normal. But I took a chance, packed up and moved in with Sam. On our first night together, we had a romantic dinner, but he looked worried and avoided eye contact. I tensed. Something happened. Sam said he had a confession to make, and he would understand if I decided to leave him after that. The excitement made me feel queasy. I was already prepared for him to tell me about his cheating, but Sam said something else. It turned out that he could not have children. At first, I couldn't believe my ears. I always dreamed of a baby. My eyes instantly filled with tears. I cried all night, and Sam just sat there and stroked my hair. This was very hard news. But I knew that no one had ever treated me so well, and although I dreamed of having a child, I understood that the most important thing was a happy relationship. After weighing everything up, I made a firm decision to stay with Sam. After all, the main thing was that we loved each other, and we could adopt a child. Tears welled up in Sam's eyes. He kept telling me that I would never regret being with him. And he confirmed it with actions. Sam made me breakfast every morning, took care of me, and gave me presents. I felt like the happiest girl in the world. As the major championship of the year approached, Sam spent more and more time training. I tried to support him, but he came home so tired and sullen. Once he even raised his voice at me. When I suggested that we go for a ride in the evening, I was so hurt. Besides, Sam never took me to the races with him, whereas the other racers always took their girlfriends. Maybe he was ashamed of me. Sam distanced himself from me every day, and I decided to take matters into my own hands. After all, what did he love most? Me and the race, so I needed to combine it. I arrived at the racetrack a few hours before the start of the competition. Sam was already here, drinking a milkshake by his sports car, and at the moment, I had an idea. I decided to get in the car to give him a real surprise. But Sam never left his car for a second. Damn it. Fortunately, not far away, I noticed some girls begging the guard to let them go to the race. What if... I took out my ID, went to the guard, and said that these girls were my interns. The guard nodded, and the girls almost threw themselves on my neck with delight. Be quiet, please. I've got something for you to do. Do you see Sam the Racer? You need to take more selfies with him. The girls looked at each other in bewilderment and immediately rushed to Sam. He never refused to take a selfie with his fans. While the girls were taking pictures, I was able to sneak to the car and climbed inside. I would never get used to how cramped it was. I barely hid behind the driver's seat, and just in time, Sam was already getting behind the wheel. I was looking forward to how happy he would be to have such a surprise. Except, damn, was he on his way to the racetrack already? Sam started to accelerate, and I heard him swear. The car did not accelerate to the maximum. It was because of me. My weight slowed everything down. There was no further delay. I scrambled out of my hiding place with a guilty face, and Sam swerved in surprise. We almost hit the fence. But he quickly pulled himself together and shouted that I was setting him up. He was going to lose because of my stupid trick. I was shaking, but what to do? In an icy tone, Sam said that he was going to slow down on the turn, and at the moment, I would have to jump out of the car. Was this a joke? No, you're a jerk. I am going to crash. At that moment, Sam opened the door and pushed me out of the car with all of his strength. I woke up in a hospital room. God, I couldn't even feel my hands, and I couldn't move. All the events flashed in my head, and I felt so angry at Sam. I hated him. His race win was more important than my life. As luck would have it, the news was just being turned on in the ward, and suddenly I heard a familiar voice. Sam was on the screen. With a happy smile, he accepted congratulations for winning the race and was awarded a cash prize, $2 million. So he almost killed me for the money? I felt a mixture of powerlessness and anger. How dared he? And most importantly, how could I have believed his lies all this time? A nurse came into the room and told me that someone came to see me. I forcefully turned my head toward the door and saw Sam. What a jerk. You were so cocky to show face to me. Sam was standing with a huge bouquet of flowers, and suddenly he got down on one knee and begged for my forgiveness. Go away, please. The devices above my head began to beep sharply, and the doctor came immediately. He told Sam to get out of here right away. I couldn't be nervous right now. Sam left, but he did stop looking for a meeting. He passed gifts through nurses and notes with only the phrase, "Please listen to me." I felt bad just thinking about talking to him, but his persistence amazed me. All right, let him come. But what could he tell me? I certainly didn't expect what would happen next. Sam was in the room an hour later. Suddenly, he knelt down in front of my bed and took my hand. And then, looking into my eyes, he said that he had news. My stomach went cold. Sam said it was all about his ex-girlfriend, Caroline. Stop, so that was your news? Oh my god, are you two getting together? Sam looked down and said she was pregnant. By him. I couldn't believe it. How? I thought you couldn't have children. Sam started to stammer out that it was a 1 in a million chance, and he didn't believe it himself, but the DNA results confirmed it. To me, his words sounded like they were coming out of the water. But that wasn't all. It turned out that Caroline was seriously ill and needed a liver transplant, and her family had no money. If I don't help her, she'll die with a baby, Sam added in a whisper. That's why it was so important for him to get that money. I was stunned. Why didn't he just tell me everything? We could have worked something out, and now everything was destroyed. Sam kept saying that he didn't know how to tell me, because I probably would have left him right away after that, and he didn't want to lose me. But what you did only made it worse. Sam took my hand and whispered that if I didn't want to see him again, he would never come into my life again. I didn't have the strength to answer, so he left. And I lay there, gaze fixed at some point. Suddenly, I heard a child in the next room start laughing. It was like an electric shock. I realized that Sam had done the right thing by deciding to save his child. We needed to give the money immediately so that Caroline could have the surgery. With trembling hands, I texted Sam. Sam, I want you to be happy. Do everything you need to make sure that your baby is born healthy. I was discharged a week later, and Sam came to pick me up in his car to take me to another hospital, to where Caroline's surgery was taking place. I was still weak, But all I could think about was making sure the surgery was successful. The waiting was driving me crazy. I couldn't find a place for myself, and Sam was also very worried. But even in the state, he did not let go of my hand, repeating that everything would go well. 4 hours later, the doctor finally came out of the room. "How is it going, doctor?" His gaze made me pause. The doctor said they did everything they could, but they couldn't save Caroline. I felt like I was blacking out, but I just squeezed Sam's hand harder. "Please hold on." Gathering my strength, I was able to ask only one question. "What about the baby?" The doctor said that the girl was now in intensive care and her condition was stable. I almost fainted in my excitement, but Sam caught me. He was stunned by the news and could not believe that he had become a father. After all, after his diagnosis, he did not dare to think about such a thing. I knew he was hurt by the news about Caroline, and I hugged him as hard as I could. At that moment, I leaned over to Sam and whispered that we wouldn't give the baby to anyone. Sam held me tight and told me how incredibly lucky he was to have a woman like me. I realized how important it is to be able to forgive, and now I have everything I dreamed of: a husband I love very much, and our dear baby. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa and I'm 18. Tell me, have you ever been kidnapped? Taken to a place you don't know? I hope not, because it all happened to me. And I have to say, I've never been so scared. Watch this video to the end and you will learn how a taxi ride changed my life forever. I recently graduated from high school and went to college in New York. I didn't move here alone, but with my mother. I never saw my father. As a child, I tried to find out from my mother who my father was. However, each time she left the subject or just kept silent. In college, I immediately became friends with John and Angela. We had a lot in common, but the thing that bound us together the most was that we all loved dancing. I wanted to do it since I was a child, but helping my mother and studying did not leave any free time. When I got home, I immediately told my mother that I had decided to take up dancing. I thought she would support me and be happy, but she started a terrible row. She absolutely forbade me to dance. I was in shock. Why did she react like that? When I tried to find out why, I got only one answer: no. Have you ever received a rejection from your parents without explanation? The next day, I told the guys everything. They were very surprised, but offered to dance in secret from my mom. So we decided to pretend that I was playing basketball. And if my mother suddenly started asking, the guys would back me up. It's been half a year. During this time, my mother never found out that now, unbeknownst to her, I went to dances. John and Angela covered me every time my mother asked about basketball. And even our dance teacher, after learning my story, decided to help by calling my mom and pretending to be a basketball coach. She talked about my achievements in sports and told my mother that I had a great future in basketball. Yeah, right. And everything was fine. But recently, I learned something strange. One day, my mother went to the city for shopping and I decided to make her happy and clean up the house. As I was putting things in the closet, I came across a box of old albums. And the first one that came to my hands was completely unfamiliar to me. It was mostly pictures of my mother with a man. Almost all the photos showed them dancing. Unfortunately, I couldn't see the man's face because it was cut out in all the photos. After that moment, I heard someone drive up to the house. When I went to the window, I saw that it was my mother. I quickly put the album back in its place. I thought those photos were strange, but I never dared to ask my mother what it all meant. One day, Angela and I were sitting in our favorite diner near the college, waiting for John. When he arrived, he immediately placed on the table an invitation to participate in a dance competition between universities. The winning team received a week's trip to Europe. We were all happy, but there was one problem. The contest was in another city, and I had to make up some excuse to my mother. So we decided to go to my house and tell her that they were taking us to a basketball competition. We ordered a taxi and went straight to my place. All the way we discussed what we would tell my mother, how we would rest in Europe if we won, and how we would grieve if we lost. When I got home and was about to get out, the taxi driver abruptly grabbed my hand and gave me a piece of paper with his number, saying that I could call at any time if I needed to go somewhere fast. I was surprised and a little scared by this, but my mind was so full of other things that I just took the paper and left. At home, my mother greeted us warmly. She cooked dinner, set the table, and we sat and talked about various topics. After signaling to each other and realizing that the time had come, we told my mother about the basketball trip. We even called the teacher to confirm our words. My mother agreed, but said that she would go with me. We didn't expect this. So for the next 20 minutes, we tried to talk her out of it, but it ended when John accidentally said, "Oh my God, you're not even interested in our dancing." Everyone fell silent. At first, he didn't understand why I was looking at him as if I was going to kill him. However, having understood, he didn't even have time to explain because she started yelling at us and saying that we were liars. She kicked the kids out and directed all her anger at me alone. Has your secret ever been revealed in the most stupid way possible? We were fighting all night. I tried to explain everything to her, but she wouldn't even listen to me. Then I could not stand it. I went to the closet, took out the album, and asked her why she could dance in her youth with someone unknown, and she restricted me. I had never seen my mother so confused and lost. At that moment, it dawned on me. The man she danced with in these photos was my father. I started to ask her about it, but my mother took the album and told me to go to my room. Now I was under house arrest. It lasted 4 days. All this time I was just thinking about those photos and my father, who I didn't have. So I put my hand in my pocket and found the piece of paper the taxi driver had left me. The contest was supposed to be today, so I decided that I would go to it, and I didn't care what my mother thought about it. I called the number, packed my bags, and escaped through the window. All the way I was thinking about the fight, my friends, my father, and I didn't notice that we were going in a completely different direction. I asked where we were, but the taxi driver kept going in his own direction. I was terrified. I shook him and told him to stop or I would call the police. But he kept silent and drove on. And I couldn't actually call since the charge was at 0. I wanted to get out, so I tried to open the door with all my strength, but it wouldn't budge. Then I tried to jump out of the open window, but the taxi driver put me back in the car and fastened my seatbelt. We arrived at a farm. He said to get out of the car and follow him. I said I wasn't going anywhere without an explanation, so he took my hand and led me to the house. As we walked, I imagined the worst possible scenarios. A room of torture, slavery, or worse. We went to his house. Inside, everything looked nice and neat, but it didn't make me feel any better. He went to the closet and looked for something. I decided this was the perfect moment to escape and was already searching for an item that could knock him out and give me a head start on my escape. But then, a woman's voice startled me. It was a woman with a child in her arms. She started yelling at him and telling him where he was and why he didn't answer the phone. They began to quarrel among themselves. I was just in shock at what was happening. but I figured they wouldn't notice me and I could sneak out. However, just as I was about to do this, he grabbed my hand and shouted to the whole room that I was his daughter and showed me the photo in the album. It was the same photo of my mother dancing with a man. Only this time, instead of the cutout face, it was the face of the taxi driver. My father. I froze. I had so many questions, but I didn't know where to start. My father sat down and told us everything. It turned out he met my mother at a dance competition when they were young. Both were engaged in dancing and immediately fell in love with each other. They spent a whole week together. However, after that, they left for their cities. And he didn't even know that she was pregnant with his child. But when he drove me home with his friends, he saw her, heard about my love of dancing, and thought, is she my daughter? That's when I understood why my mother didn't want me to dance. She was afraid that I would repeat her fate. My father began to apologize for not being around all his life. I let out a sigh of relief because my fears were in vain, and I hugged him. My search was complete, and I finally found my father and found out the truth. The next day, when I returned home, I brought my father with me. My mother froze in shock, and they both blushed. They spent the whole day fighting, then laughing, and although there was no more love between them, they forgave each other because they realized that they were both to blame for what had happened. Of course, my mother scolded me for running away and getting into a stranger's car. But now she's calm about my dancing and even agreed to give me and the guys a few lessons. We are trying to establish contact with my father. Of course, I can't change his absence in my life, but we can at least try to become a family. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you like it, put a like, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about it, and remember that nothing is more important than family.